Welcome to Dark and Haunting Tales. Brace yourselves for some terrifying night shift stories that will keep you up at night. We bring you a collection of bone-curdling tales from those who have experienced the horrors of the night shift. Get ready, feel your heart race and your skin crawl as we unveil some of the most terrifying stories that will send shivers down your spine. Warning, the following stories may be disturbing for some viewers. Be advised. Now, are you ready to be terrified? Then let's begin. I was your average office worker, the kind who often stayed late to meet deadlines and tackle the never-ending workload. One fateful night, I decided to pull an all-nighter, thinking I could get ahead of my tasks. Little did I know that my choice would lead to a terrifying survival story that still haunts me. The office building was eerily quiet as I sat at my desk, the only source of light coming from my computer screen, the soft hum of the air conditioner, and the occasional tap of my keyboard were the only sounds that broke the silence. I had made myself a pot of strong coffee, hoping it would keep me awake and alert. Hours passed, and as the clock neared midnight, I began to feel an unsettling presence in the room. I dismissed it as my imagination playing tricks on me, chalking it up to the fatigue and the solitude of the late hour. But as the night wore on, the feeling of being watched grew stronger. I could sense something lurking in the shadows, just beyond my peripheral vision. Every now and then, I would catch a glimpse of movement out of the corner of my eye. But when I turned to look, there was nothing there. I tried to focus on my work, but a sense of unease gained at me. I could hear faint ghostly whispers that seemed to emanate from the dark corners of the office. My heart pounded in my chest as I strained to make out the words, but they were just quiet murmurs that I couldn't understand. As the clock struck 3 a.m. and the office seemed to come alive with malevolent energy, the soft whispering grew louder and more coherent. I could hear phrases like, "You are not alone," and "Leave this place," echoing through the room. Panic welled up inside me as I realized that I was, in fact, not alone. Something was in the office with me, something that didn't belong to the realm of the living. I frantically looked around, but there was no one to be seen.
"Who's there?"
I called out, my voice trembling. There was no response, but an eerie silence that hung in the air like a heavy shroud. I decided to gather my belongings and leave. But as I reached for my coat, the lights flickered and then went out, plunging the office into darkness. I fumbled for my phone, using its feeble light to guide me, but in the dim glow, I saw them, shadow figures moving towards me, their features obscured and their intentions unknown. I stumbled backwards, my heart racing, and I made a run for the office door, but as I reached for the handle, a cold, bony hand gripped my shoulder, sending a shock of terror through me. I turned to see a spectral figure, its eyes empty and lifeless, staring into my soul. It whispered a chilling warning, "You should." With all the strength I could muster, I wrenched myself free and burst through the office door, fleeing into the empty corridor. The building was still and dark, but I didn't dare look back. I raced down the stairs, my heart pounding, until I finally burst out into the safety of the night. The next day, I told my co-workers what happened, but no one believed me, except the janitor. He was 60 years old and have worked for the building for 30 years, who told me the dark story about these vengeful spirits that have been occupying this office for decades. He said that once this office was occupied by employees who one day were working all night, and a fire struck in the building, and these workers were blocked inside from both entrances, and by the time firefighters arrived, no one could help them, and they all burned alive. From that day, they haunted this office, seeking revenge on everyone that occupied it. They only come at night, exactly at 3 a.m., the time at which they all died. After what I was told, I quit my job and never went back. That night, I learned the horrifying truth that some places are not meant to be occupied after dark, and that the line between the living and the dead can blur in the most unexpected of places. My survival story in that office still haunts my dreams, a reminder that there are things beyond our understanding, lurking in the shadows, waiting to attack all who disturb its territory. I used to work as a security guard for a creepy old warehouse on the outskirts of town. The place always gave me the creeps, but I needed the job. One night, while patrolling the dark and desolate building, I encountered something that would turn into a terrifying survival story. The warehouse was massive, with rows upon rows of towering shelves stacked with dusty crates and forgotten relics. The only illumination came from the dim overhead lights that cast long, eerie shadows in every direction. As I made my rounds, the silence was broken only by the echo of my footsteps on the concrete floors. But then I began to notice something strange. Shadows moving in the corners of my vision, where there should have been none. I stopped dead in my tracks, my heart pounding in my chest. I swung my flashlight around, trying to catch whatever it was. But there was nothing there. Just empty, dusty corners of the warehouse. I shook my head, choking it up to fatigue and the creepy atmosphere of the place. I continued my rounds, but the shadows persisted, darting out of sight every time I tried to focus on them. It was as if the darkness itself was alive, playing tricks on me. I began to feel a growing sense of unease, like I was being watched by something malevolent. I reached for my walkie-talkie to call for backup, but as I pressed the button, all I heard was static. My heart raced as I realized that my only lifeline to the outside world was useless. As I ventured deeper into the warehouse, the shadows grew more aggressive, swirling and dancing around me. I could hear faint whispers, like a chorus of sinister voices, but I couldn't make out the words. Panic began to set in as I realized that something wicked was at play in that dark, foreboding place. I knew I had to get out, but every direction I turned seemed to lead me further into that creepy aisles of that warehouse. Then I saw it, a figure, or at least the outline of one, lurking in the shadows ahead. It was tall and hunchy, with elongated limbs that seemed to stretch and contort as it moved. I raised my flashlight, illuminating the figure for just a moment. Its eyes, or what appeared to be eyes, glowed with an unnatural, malevolent light. I could feel its gaze piercing through me, and a wave of dread washed over me. Without thinking, I turned and ran, my heart pounding in my chest. The shadows closed in around me like a suffocating shroud. I could hear the whispering voices growing louder, taunting me with their unintelligible words. I stumbled out of the warehouse and into the cool night air, gasping for breath. The moment I stepped outside, the shadows retreated, vanishing into thin air. I never went back to that warehouse, and I quit my job as a security guard soon after. I still have nightmares about the unexplained shadows and the malevolent presence that lurked in that creepy place. That night was a chilling reminder that there are forces beyond our understanding, and that sometimes darkness itself can come alive and play tricks on those who dare to venture into its depth. My survival story in that warehouse was a terrifying encounter with the unknown, one that still haunts me to this day. I had been working as a nurse for years, and I was no stranger to the eerie and often unsettling atmosphere of a hospital during the night shift. But one fateful night, I encountered something that would turn my usual routine into a terrifying survival story. It was a practical quiet night in the hospital. Most of the patients were asleep, and the halls were empty. I was stationed in the nurse's station, catching up on paperwork and sipping my lukewarm coffee. The clock on the wall ticked slowly, and the only sounds were the distant hum of medical equipment and soft murmurs of patients in their rooms. As I settled into the routine, I began to hear something strange, a faint rhythmic tapping, like footsteps, coming from the empty hospital wing down the corridor. I frowned, thinking it might be a janitor or security guard making their rounds, but it was odd for anyone to be there at this hour. I decided to investigate, grabbing my flashlight and heading down the dimly lit corridor. The tapping continued, growing louder with each step. It was as if someone was pacing back and forth, their footsteps echoing through the empty hall. As I turned the corner into the deserted wing, my flashlight illuminated a chilling sight. There, in front of me, were a group of figures, transparent, ethereal, and dressed in old-fashioned hospital gowns. They were patients, or at least they appeared to be, but they were unlike any patients I had ever seen. I could see right through them, and their features were distorted, as if time had eroded their faces. They seemed to be lost in their own world, pacing the corridor aimlessly, their footsteps echoing in an eerie, disjointed rhythm. I froze, my heart pounding in my chest. I knew I should have turned and run, but curiosity got the better of me. I cautiously approached the ghostly figures and tried to speak to them.
Hello? Can I help you?
I stammered, my voice trembling. One of the apparitions turned towards me, its eyes empty and distant. It whispered,
We are waiting.
My skin crawled as I realized that these were not ordinary patients. They were trapped spirits from the past, lingering in the hospital, unable to move. The tapping sounds were their restless footsteps, a haunting reminder of their eternal wait. I tried to communicate with them, but their responses were cryptic and filled with sadness. They spoke of unfinished business and yearning to be free. As I stood there, the atmosphere grew colder, and I could feel a heaviness in the air, as if the weight of their unfulfilled desires was pressing down on me. I knew I had to find a way to help them. I spent hours that night searching through old hospital records and archives, piecing together the stories of the lost souls that wandered the empty wing. It was a hunting journey into the past, uncovering the tragedies and the unfulfilled dreams that had bound them to this place. Finally, with the knowledge of their stories, I conducted a small ceremony, a way to help them find peace and move on from this world. As I watched the ghostly figures slowly faded away, their footsteps growing fainter until they disappeared completely. That night, I learned that the past has a way of reaching out to the present, and that the spirits of those who suffered and died in the hospital can linger, waiting for someone to hear their stories and help them to find closure. My survival story in that empty hospital wing was a haunting reminder of the thin veil between the living and the dead, and the enduring power of the human spirit. I worked as a park ranger in a remote forest, and one night during a routine patrol, I stumbled upon something that would turn into a terrifying survival story. It was a moonlit night, and the forest was bathed in an eerie, silvery glow. As I walked along the forest trail, I heard faint, distant chanting. My curiosity got the better of me, and I followed the sound, thinking it might be a group of hikers or campers in need of assistance. I soon realized that the source of the chanting was something far more sinister. I crept closer and hid behind the thick tree trunk, my heart pounding as I peered through the branches. In a clearing up ahead, I saw a group of hooded figures, their robes billowing in the night breeze. They stood in a circle around a flickering bonfire, and their voices rose in a chilling, otherworldly chant. I couldn't make out their faces, and the sense of dread that washed over me was overwhelming. They were performing a ritual, and it was like nothing I had ever seen before. The forest seemed to come alive with an unnatural energy, as if the very trees and rocks were watching in silent horror. I knew I had to get out of there, but fear held me in place. As I watched, the hooded figures began to move with an eerie, synchronized precision. Their gestures were deliberate and haunting, and the words of their chant grew louder and more foreboding. It was clear that this was no ordinary gathering. This was something dark and malevolent, something that should not exist in the natural world. Just as I was about to make a run for it, a twig snapped beneath my foot, and the hooded figures turned in my direction. Panic surged through me as I realized that I had been discovered. The hooded figures descended on me with terrifying swiftness, their eyes hidden beneath the shadows of their hoods. I tried to escape, but they were too fast, too strong. They dragged me toward the bonfire, their grip like iron. I struggled and fought with all my strength, but it was futile. They were chanting louder now, their voices drowning out my screams for help. I felt a searing pain as they began to bind me to a wooden stake beside the bonfire. I knew that I was their sacrifice, their offering to whatever dark forces they worshipped. The flames of the bonfire danced hungrily, and the hooded figures raised their arms in a final, chilling chant. Just as they were about to set the bonfire ablaze, a gunshot rang out through the forest. A second shot followed, and one of the hooded figures fell to the ground. The others scattered, their ritual interrupted, and I was freed from my bindings. It was another park ranger who had come to my rescue, drawn by the distant sound of the chanting. Together, we called for backup and searched the forest for any sign of the hooded figures, but they had vanished without a trace. That night, I survived a chilling encounter with a group of sinister cultists in the moonlit forest. Their intentions and the dark forces they summoned remain a mystery to this day, a reminder that the natural world can sometimes hide the most terrifying secrets. I worked as a maintenance worker, and one fateful day, I was tasked with inspecting an old abandoned house at the edge of town. It was a rundown, ivy-covered building that had long been forgotten, and the air around it felt heavy with the secrets. Little did I know that this job would lead me to uncover a horrifying secret lurking in the basement. As I approached the house, I couldn't help but shudder. Its windows were shattered, and the front door hung half open, creaking ominously in the wind. The place had an aura of malevolence that sent shivers down my spine. I cautiously entered, my flashlight cutting through the darkness. Cobwebs clung to every corner, and the air was thick with dust. It was clear that no one had set foot in this place for years. My first task was to check the basement. The stairs creaked with each step, as if protesting the intrusion. The basement was damp and cold, the walls lined with crumbling brickwork. As I descended, the air grew even heavier, and I felt like I was descending into a crypt. My flashlight beam revealed rows of old dusty shelves, stacked with the jars of what appeared to be pickled vegetables. But as I approached, I realized with a sinking feeling that they were not vegetables at all. Inside those jars were preserved human organs. Hearts, lungs, and even whole eyes stared back at me in grotesque, unnatural preservation. I staggered back in horror, my mind racing to make sense of this discovery. What kind of place was this? And who had committed such unspeakable acts? As I continued to explore the basement, I found a room hidden behind a heavy steel door. It was a small, windowless chamber, and the walls were covered in strange symbols and eerie drawings. The air inside was icy cold, and the foul stench hung in the air. In the corner of the room, I saw something that made my blood run cold. A child's crib, old and run down, but with fresh blood stains on the sheets. The realization hit me like a sledgehammer. This room had been a chamber of horrors, a place where unspeakable acts had been committed against the innocent. I couldn't get out of the basement fast enough. I rushed up the stairs, my heart pounding, and fled the house, vowing never to return. I reported my findings to the authorities, and an investigation was launched. It was revealed that the house had once belonged to a family of sadistic killers who had terrorized the town decades ago. They had lured victims into their home, where they had committed unspeakable acts of violence and depravity. That day, I had uncovered the horrifying secret of that abandoned house, a place that had hidden the darkness of human atrocities. My survival story was a chilling reminder that evil can leave its mark even long after the perpetrators are gone, and that some secrets are best left buried in the depth of darkness. Thank you for joining us on these terrifying stories. These stories are a mere glimpse into the terror faced by those who brave the night shift. So if you ever find yourself working late at night, just remember the horrifying tales we've just shared. If you enjoyed the video and want to experience more disturbing stories, don't forget to subscribe to our channel, like the video, and turn on post notification. Until next time, sleep tight if you can.